Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Compass Christian Church. My name is Luke Davidson. I'm the campus pastor with our North Richland Hills campus. I'm really excited to be here with you today. We're continuing in a series called Crazy Like Us. And every year as a church, we like to look back at where we've come from and all the things that we've been able to do and accomplish, and also look ahead at where we're going into the future. And that's what we're doing during this series. And when we look over the past year, it's been an incredible year. Like, I don't know if you knew this, but our North Richland Hills campus launched in January of this year, and our North Fort Worth campus launched in March. It's just been an awesome year. And specifically with North Richland Hills, where I'm at, I know that many of you came over and helped us launch that campus, or you gave money generously to help us launch. I just want to say thank you guys so much. It's been going incredibly well. I want to thank all of you for participating in that. But there's a lot more that's been going on across our church. We've been in this thing called Uncharted. And in Uncharted, we had $35 million that was committed by many of you. We've already received over 30 million of that. Isn't that awesome just in and of itself? Can we just celebrate that? So we are well on our way and should hit that goal in the very near future. I just wanted you to see some of the things we've been able to do as a church because of that. It's just blown open the doors of what we've been able to do. First off, this past year, Outreach Magazine just reported us, Compass, as the 76th fastest growing church in America out of all churches, all denominations, which, think about all the money that goes towards growing something at that sort of pace. At the same time, our church has also been able to eliminate and or avoid about $8 million in potential debt, which is phenomenal. Can you imagine just how aggressive you have to be to make that sort of movement in eliminating debt? At the same time, we also gave over $1 million to our missions partners in addition to what we already give them every single year. At the same time, we also launched 2 new campuses that are running about 800 people every single Sunday. Guys, that's crazy. We should celebrate that again. Absolutely crazy. Now I want you to understand that many times when we give, we think that, hey, if somebody inspires me and motivates me or guilts me enough, then I'll take some of what I've said is for me and I might give it to you. And I'm just telling you, if that's the way generosity worked, we wouldn't have been able to do all these things. Like, if you just randomly responded, like, we might have gotten one of these things and said, hey, we want to raise $8 million, and we try to sell you on it every single week and give us your money, give us. We might have attained one of these, but not all of them. You can't do all of these things unless you have premeditated, calculated, designated generosity. And that's kind of what we're talking about. Generosity is more than random acts of giving. That's what we said last week. If you missed last week's message, go back and listen to last week's message. But what we're talking about through generosity is something that's different than just randomly responding to needs. We're all for random acts of kindness. When your neighbor needs something, when the school is raising money, when there's a disaster and the church is trying to raise emergency funds, yes, random acts of giving are great. But when we talk about generosity, we're talking about something a little more than that. Here's the definition that we're working with. Generosity is the premeditated, meaning that you have a plan, you've thought it out. Calculated, meaning that you know the amount. Designated, meaning that you know where it's gonna go. Emancipation, meaning that you've set it free. And what are you setting free? Personal financial assets. This sort of preparation, you know what it does? It enables you to meet spontaneous needs. When a need arises, you're able to help. You're able to give because you prepared. If you hadn't prepared, then you wouldn't be able to meet spontaneous needs. And that's kind of the problem that we're going to talk through today, is that most of us haven't prepared. We don't have any margin in our finances to even give, let alone to try to be generous. Most of us in the Western world, what do we do? In America or Canada or in Europe, most of us, we spend everything that we make, if not more than what we make, and it enters into this crazy cycle where we start to spend more than we make, sometimes on things that we don't even need. It's just things that we want, and that leads us to go into debt. And we go into debt on things that the moment that we bought them, because maybe we didn't have enough money to get it, the moment that we bought it, the cost goes up and the value goes down. The moment that you drove it off the lot, the cost went up, the value goes down because now you're paying interest on it. The moment that you took it off the shelf, the cost goes up, the value goes down because you didn't really have the money to get it, so you're buying it off of a lender. You're spending more than you actually had. You go into debt on something that maybe you didn't really need. Like maybe you didn't really need the car, but you really wanted it, but you were having a midlife crisis, so you had to buy it, but you couldn't afford it, so you financed it, and it was really fun for like 2 months, and then you're like, man, this is expensive, and this isn't really fulfilling me like I thought it would. And then the crazy cycle says, maybe this other car will take care of that feeling inside of me. And so I'll get another one, and you start the cycle of crazy. The iPhone X came out last year. Radical advancement in technology. We eliminated the home screen button. Whoa, it's gone. This year, we've got the iPhone XR. What's different? There's an R at the end. It's fantastic. Some of you are like, easy, the pictures are better. And I'm like, okay, you keep telling yourself that. All right? But maybe you just had to have it, but you didn't have the money. And so you said, I don't care, I gotta have it, the pictures are better. I'll throw it on the credit card. And that's what we do. Sometimes we make silly decisions with our spending into debt. And now if you got this sort of debt, you don't have any margin in your finances. And if you don't have any wiggle room and everything's tight and you're paid paycheck to paycheck every single month, you got something to worry about. And what do you worry about up here? You worry about future consumption. What if, will I have enough to buy a house or to go to school or to send my kids to college or to get married? And what if this happens? You never know, and you worry about your future consumption. And so what do? You spend everything that you made, if not more, which leads you into debt, and you got no margin, and then you worry about your future consumption, so you consume everything, and then you've got consumer debt, you got no margin for consumption. This crazy thing takes over our life. And we go around and around and around. This is the American way. And what drives this is a mindset that says, if it comes to me, it's for me. It's for me. Not necessarily for other people, it's for my consumption, it's for me to consume, for me to spend on myself. What if I don't have enough? And we get this hoard mentality of just consuming, disposing, trying to get it all to satisfy everything that I feel like I need. My consumption. The question that will kind of set us up for our message today is this: how much more money would you need to break your habit of spending more than you make? Maybe it's a percentage or something like that. How much more would you need to break the cycle? Say, man, if I had that, I wouldn't spend more than I make. If I had that much, I would get out of debt and I'd stay out of debt. If I had that much, I would finally have margin in my life. If I had that much, I wouldn't worry anymore. How much more money would you need in order to stop the habit of spending more than you make? 10%, 15%, 20% more? What if you went into work tomorrow and your boss said, hey, congratulations, 25% raise, you're doing a great job. And you went home and you said, Mom and Dad, because you still live at home. And you said, I got it right. No, I'm just kidding. If you said to your spouse or you said to your roommate, you said, I got a 25% raise, man, I'm golden, this is gonna be fantastic. I can get out of debt. I don't have to worry about anything anymore. I'm actually gonna give some away. You'd start to say those things, you'd be so happy. But here's the reality. How much more money would you need to get out of spending more than you make, more than you'll ever make at one time? You're not gonna get a 25% raise tomorrow. I mean, 99.9% of us, what happens is you work hard and maybe the next year you get a raise. But then you spend it and you spend everything that you made, and incrementally it's a small amount and you spend it and the cycle continues. The next year goes by, on and on and on. Let's say that even if you did get a 25% raise, I bet that you'd still spend it. You know how I know? Just look at people that win the lottery. Did you know that in 2016, Teresa Murray reported that 70% of people who win the lottery will go bankrupt? 70%. These are people that didn't just get 25% more than they ever made. They got 25 times more than they ever made. 50 times more than they ever made. And yet, even though the amount that they got went up, so did their spending. Their spending went up, their debt went up, they had no margin, and their worry went up. Some of them, their entire lives fell apart, all of their relationships, everything. We think that money is the solution. Man, often is not. There's a core thing that needs to be solved. So when we look at this crazy cycle here, we think that if I had more money, that would solve and I wouldn't spend more than I make. But we're not talking about a money problem here. We're talking about a self-control issue. When it comes to debt, yes, I know that with the margins, you need more money to get out of debt, but it's not really a money problem. It's a contentment problem. It's being satisfied with what you have and with what you need. Can you be content? Can you be happy? Margin is not really just a money problem. The source of it is a discipline problem. Worry is not just a money problem. It's a spiritual problem. Like if you had 15% more in your life, do you think you would stop worrying? That's what we think. I wouldn't worry anymore. I would actually be content. I would be happy. These things wouldn't take over my life and just drive me crazy all of the time. The Apostle Paul was one of the guys who got to see Jesus after he came back from the dead. And Paul's like, he was dead, he's alive, I gotta tell people about it. And so he starts to travel around and tell people Jesus came back to life. And he goes and he starts churches in all these different cities. And he gets there, and those people worried about money just as much as you and I do. And Paul started to teach them about money and how understanding what Jesus has done for you can change the way that you see and organize your money around generosity. And the thing that he taught them was, listen, you worry about money because you've put your trust in riches, because you trust riches instead of trusting the one who richly provides. Do you trust God or do you trust money? What is your savior? Who is your savior? Is money a tool, or do you think it's actually the thing that's gonna save who you are? Maybe you think that if you got 15% more, you wouldn't worry anymore. If you got 50% more money, you wouldn't worry anymore. You're wrong. You know why? Because there's people in this room that make 50% more than you and they still worry. And there's people in this room that make 100% more than you and they still worry. Pastor Andy Stanley, he's the pastor of a church in Atlanta, Georgia that we partner with, North Point. He tells a story that one night he was at a banquet. And at that banquet, he got to sit at a table with some billionaires that he knew through a friend. He had never met them. He was excited to get to sit with them and to talk, and fascinating conversation. These individuals who had built this wealth and this empire, billions of dollars. At one point in the dinner, they started to talk about money. And he said it wasn't long after that the couple started to say, well, you never know. What if this happens? You got to diversify. What if you get sick? You never know. What if? Andy Stanley got in the car with his wife after the dinner and said, if they don't know, there is no hope for us. Because you could see it in their eyes, you never know, what if this happens and all this stuff. There's no point in us even trying or even thinking that we could ever know or have everything taken care of. And yet we fall into this cycle of worrying, well, I have enough. What if this happens? And what if I gotta get it. And we fall into this crazy cycle. It takes over our mind, it takes over us. Thinking that money can somehow solve it if I can just get more. Jesus called this something that may offend you. Jesus called this cycle greed. And when you think of greed, it's not something that you can really see in the mirror. Like when you think of greed, you think of some dude in his basement counting all of his gold. Like Uncle Scrooge is just swimming through all of cash, just swimming through it. And you're just like, there's people out there that are just swimming through their wealth. Nobody does that. You think of greed, you think of some Victorian era woman sitting on a bed surrounded by, priceless pieces of art and stacks of cash and jewelry, and she's just salivating, staring. Nobody does that. I'll tell you what greed is. Greed is the person who has a little amount, a medium amount, even a large amount. The amount doesn't really matter. But they just assume that whatever it is, they assume that it all belongs to them and that it's all for them. It's all for me, it belongs to me, it's for me to consume. I gotta figure out how I can consume and dispose of this money. And when you get in that mentality, that greed, it throws you into that crazy cycle and it leads to discontentment no matter how many zeros you add to it. If you fall into the cycle and just assume that it's all for me, you'll always be discontent, you'll always be worried. And it'll be something that really attacks your soul and your mind. But I'll tell you, the answer, the cure is generosity. Generosity breaks the crazy cycle. Generosity, not just saying like, if you motivate me and inspire me and guilt me, then I'll take some of what I have already allotted and said it belongs to me, and I might deny myself and give it to you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually organizing your life and seeing it as a responsibility to start to think differently. To say, if it comes to me, maybe it's not necessarily for me. It might have come to me, but it might be for someone else. And I might have an opportunity, even a responsibility, to make sure that I distribute that where it needs to go to be generous towards others. It's a different mindset. Generous people have this. So many people in our church have this. That's why we're able to do so much, but we don't want to drift away from it. There are too many orphans, too many ministries. There are families right here in this city that count on us. We cannot afford to stop being generous. Next week, Pastor Drew's gonna be back. Some of you are like, praise the Lord, get this skinny, high-pitched guy off the stage. He's gonna come back, he's gonna give you a plan on how to order your life around generosity. But if you don't change the way that you think, Doesn't matter what we teach you. You could go to our Financial Peace University class, and I hope that you do. It comes up in a couple months. And you could start to put those steps into your life. But if you don't change the way that you think, at some point you're gonna get worried again. You're gonna worry about your future consumption, and then you're gonna spend more than you make, and you're gonna go into debt, no margin, worry, and the cycle is gonna take back over. You have to change the way that you think. To think, if it comes to me, it's not necessarily for me. One day Jesus was with his disciples and he told them a story, a parable. He just made up this story in order to make a point. And in the story, he starts to talk about wealth. Here's the story. Luke chapter 12. He says, once upon a time, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. So even 2,000 years ago, the rich got richer. He's got a bumper crop. It's more than he's ever had before. So he thought to himself, what am I gonna do? I've got no place to store all of my crops. I got so much stuff. We gotta get a storage unit to store all my stuff. Gotta build a bigger house. Gotta build a second house. I think it's gotta be in Miami because it's a good place to store stuff by the beach. You know, I could go there. It's just all my stuff for me. That he just assumed it was all for himself. And that's exactly what he did. The next screen that says, this is what I'll do. The guy says, I'll tear down my barns, I'll build bigger ones. And there I'll store all my surplus grain. I'll say to myself, you have plenty. I've got all I need. All the grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. I don't have to worry about anything. I'm golden. My life is taken care of. No more worry, nothing. He didn't change anything about his habits. Sometimes we just assume if we get rich, we'll automatically be generous. Not necessarily, just be a rich person. This guy didn't change anything about his habits or his spending, and he assumed it was all gonna be okay. You know what's crazy is that I think for some of us, if you went 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if you went back 30 years, and if at that point in your life, if somebody had told you how much money you'd be making today, you wouldn't have believed it. And you would have been like, fantastic. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna make that much money? That's great. That's more than I ever hoped or dreamed. That's fantastic. I won't have any worries. I can just sit back, take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. I won't have any worries. I won't have any debt. In fact, I'll be generous. I'll be floating other people. Y'all better just come hang out at my house. It's gonna be great. And yet over the years, nothing changed. You didn't start to build your life around generosity, so you just continue to consume and to take it all in and to spend on yourself. And now here you are 30 years later, you have that amount, and yet you still have worry. You still have discontentment in your life. You still have frustrations, and you still feel like you're trapped in a crazy cycle. This guy in our story just assumed it was all for himself, that he could sit back and take life easy. But then the story takes a turn in verse 20. Then God said to him, you fool, not because he was rich, because he was confused about the purpose of all this stuff that he'd been given. He said, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? The obvious answer is somebody else. Uh-oh, you had a lot of stuff. You thought you had a lot of years. You don't. You thought all the stuff guaranteed that you'd have lots of years to enjoy it. Not necessarily. Uh-oh, now your life has been demanded from you, and who's gonna get all the stuff that you thought was yours? It's gonna go to somebody else to consume, somebody else to dispose of. Think about those words for a moment. Disposable income, consumable income, disposable. It's the word that we use to talk about throwing stuff away. Consumable. It's the word that we use to describe something being engulfed in fire. I just throw my money away. I just burn it. Imagine going to a third world country with a stack of cash and trying to explain, this is my 6 months disposable, consumable income. I just throw it away. They'd look at you like, you are crazy. You're crazy. And yet we get caught in this cycle of thinking that it's all for me, consumable, disposable. And in the story, this guy finds out that he was the one who was disposable. He was consumable. And now he's gone, and who's gonna get all the stuff? Now it's someone else's to consume. And then Jesus steps out of the parable in the final slide, the final verse here. Jesus steps out and he says, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. This is how it will be. Total loss, nothing to show for it. This is how it will be for whoever stores up things, hoards things, consumes all of it, thinking it's all for me, never content, always worried, always anxious. This is how it will be for whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. Rich towards God, what does that mean? Does that mean you come to church every Sunday? Does that mean you read your Bible and pray every day? Those are good things, but he literally just told the story about a guy not giving his stuff away. This is about giving your money, giving your resources away to others instead of just storing it up for yourself. So think about it this way. If you wanted to be rich towards me, Pastor Luke, you don't need to give me anything. You know what I would love? If you wanted to be rich towards me, you could just be generous to my wife and kids. You could just love them. Some of you are like, are you even married? Yes, I'm out of high school, I graduated. I've actually got 5 kids, go figure that out. You go look on social media, it's crazy in my house. But if you were generous to my wife and kids, I would rather you do that anyway. That would just really thrill my heart. And the same is true for you, isn't it? Like if you're a parent or a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt or an older brother or older sister, if people love the people that you love, it's like they're loving you. And your Heavenly Father who owns everything and who needs nothing is saying in this story, if you will be rich towards others and not assume that it's all for you, if you'll be rich towards others, it's like you're being rich towards me. That's what God's saying in this story. Generous people get that. And generous people start to order your life. You order your life around this concept that if it comes to me, it's not necessarily for me. Generous people don't assume that it's theirs to consume. They're not just gonna throw it away if you guilt me or inspire me or motivate me and say, no, I'm gonna build this into who I am. I have an opportunity, I have a responsibility. This stuff that came to me might not necessarily be for me because I don't own it anyway. I'm not the owner. And I want us to say that out loud together today. I want you to say, I am not the owner. Even if you don't believe it, just pretend, okay? Just pretend with me. Here we go, on 3, say, I'm not the owner. 1, 2, 3. I am not the owner. Some of you are like, ah! Let's say it again. This is cathartic. This is helpful. Here we go. I am not the owner. Some of you learned this the hard way, or you know someone who has learned this the hard way because they lost everything in a divorce. Or the company went down, or the investments tanked, lost everything. You found out real quick, man, I thought I owned it, but it was all taken away just like that. Some of you, or someone you know, lost more than some of us will make in our entire lifetime. You thought you owned it, it was taken away just like that. Just like in the parable, Jesus said, listen, if it can be taken away from you, you never really owned it in the first place. I'm not the owner. Sometimes you learn that the hard way. The other way you learn this maybe is just like in our parable, somebody dies and all the stuff that was theirs, now it's passed on to somebody else to consume. All their stuff's not theirs anymore. When I was 12 years old, my grandfather passed away. He lived in the house right next to us and about a 5-acre yard in front of his house. My grandpa had so much stuff. We brought a company in to try to help us liquidate all of my grandpa's stuff. And I'll never forget the image. That entire front yard had tents and tables and auction platforms as this company came in and sold and traded and auctioned off and gave away all of these things. It was sort of traumatic to see this is the precious stuff, everything that I had associated with my grandfather. It's gone. You start to think, man, I guess he doesn't own it anymore. We kind of manage stuff for a little while and it feels like a long time, years, a few decades go by, but at some point, it's somebody else's to consume. And you learn the hard way that ownership is a myth. Now, some of you trust me and you know me, and others of you have never seen me before, and you're like, who is this guy? And others of you are like, I liked you until 10 minutes ago and we started talking about money, and now I want to know when is this series over? We're going to talk about baby Jesus. I just want to do one thing before I leave. I just want you to imagine for a moment what it would be like to live in the freedom of knowing that I'm not the owner. Some of you are so worried because you think that it's all yours. And if you would just begin to shift your mind, there's a lot of steps that we can implement that are going to be helpful, but if you just start to think and imagine I'm not the owner, it would really bring freedom and contentment to your life. And so this week, over the next 7 days, just start to think, what would it be like if I was not the owner? And when somebody asked me for something, there's an opportunity to be generous or to share, and there's that crazy thing inside of you that says, oh, what if they lose it or break it? Or what if I don't have enough? Or what if I don't get it back? You just say, there's that crazy thing, thinking that if I have more stuff that I'm gonna be happy. What a joke. Here you go. And you give it and you say, I'll double it just to prove that this thing doesn't control me. I'm not the owner. Or maybe this week, as you're thinking that way and you walk through your house and you see all your stuff, you just think to yourself, you know what? One day somebody's gonna come through here, they're gonna box it all up, take it away, sell it, auction it, trade it, burn it, throw it away. Who knows what they're gonna do with it? And I know that sounds sad, but it's true. You're not the owner, God is. And just because it came to you doesn't mean it's necessarily for you. It might be for someone else. Start to think that way. Next week, Pastor Drew's gonna give you a plan on how to implement this into your life. But I'm telling you, if you don't change the way you think, at some point you're gonna get worried again and you're gonna fall back into this cycle of fear, worrying, consuming more than what you have. You can live that way if you want, but you'll always be discontent. I don't think you want to live that way. I don't want you to live that way. There's a better way to be crazy. We're going to teach you all about it next Sunday. So don't miss part 4 of Crazy Like Us. Thank you guys.